president of Rawlings Foundation Philippines, the senior pastor of a multi-site church with over 7,000 members, president of Bible Baptist College Asia and Global Life University, founder of Global Surge, which have reached over millions of young people throughout the world. Dr. Greg Lyons was refined for the role the Lord has carved out for him. For decades, he has continued to pour himself out in service for the glory of God. He knew he is made for a greater calling, a passion to draw the best out in people, to lead them to God's master plan. The best example that our purpose is just on the other side of our willingness to surrender and listen. A vision was instilled in him, and that vision had continued to grow. Here's the story of Dr. Greg Lyons. Dr. Greg Lyons, welcome to GS Stories.
Thank you.
Well, just a little bit of your life story, sir. Can you tell us what was your dream as a kid?
You know, ever since I was a small boy, I wanted to be in business. And my father and mother are missionaries here. And so my father was in the ministry, and I just had a desire to help him and to be part of his ministry by being able to raise money and have funds to help assist him in that process. Mm-hmm. And so always had a dream to be a businessman. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story when I was in elementary. So when I was in elementary, grade 2, I received a gift at Christmas, and it was this small little toy that had a heater on it that you put in some rubber liquid and some plastic, and you could create bugs, insects. So I decided to do that. So I made one that was very fancy, and I brought it to school the next day. And when I set it on the desk of the girl beside me, she got really scared. And I realized there's a market for these. And so I called all the boys together, and I said, hey, look what happens. You know, this will scare the girls. And one boy said, can I buy that from you? And so I thought, wow, I could make a business of this. So I went back home, and I made like a dozen of these bugs, and I sold them to all my buddies in school, made some money to get through so I could have lots of merienda money.
So you were very creative as a child.
Yes,
sir.
yes. And even when I graduated from high school, I had relatives give me gifts and things like that. And so instead of taking the money that relatives gave me and just spending it on gadgets or things like that, I decided to invest it. I was going to the United States to go to college, and I thought, I'm going to invest this in Filipino handicrafts. And so I did. I bought as many as I could with all the money that I received for my high school graduation and, the different parties and things. And I bought handicrafts and carried them to the United States and sold them enough to pay for my airfare back home for Christmas whenever I wanted to come.
That's very resourceful, sir.
Yes.
Like at a very young age, you were able to think of something that would actually give you more or have profit more than just keeping all the money.
Yeah.
Listening to you, sir, I could see that you're very business-minded. Mm-hmm. What redirected you to where you are now? You're a pastor, you're doing ministry.
Well, I went to college. I wanted, when my path was to be in business, I wanted to find a wife, and I wanted a Christian wife. So I went to a college, and I selected a Bible college, actually, because I thought, where's the largest group of Christian girls that are single? And I thought, well, they're probably in Bible college. So I'm going to go to Bible college and find a wife. And that's where I met Lyon and married her. When we got married, I said, okay, I'm finished with Bible college and I want to go into business. So we left Bible college. I didn't finish my degree. And I went on to Colorado, and we began starting a business. And we got jobs to help finance it. And we're doing all of that. It was when we had our first child, my oldest son, and it was his first birthday. I know everybody remembers the first birthday party. Yeah. And so I guess because I grew up here in the Philippines, that was a significant thing. United States, they don't really celebrate the first birthday like they do here in the Philippines. But since I grew up there, I said, we're going to celebrate this. And so we had the party. And my oldest son, Luke, I was holding him. He was 1 year old. And I began to just talk to him about his Christian heritage. I said, you're a great grandfather was a Christian. Your great grandfather was a Christian. Your great grandmother was a devout, faithful servant of God. Your grandfather is a missionary serving God, planting churches in the Philippines. And then I began to think, what would he say to my grandson about me? And I thought, would he just say, you have this great Christian heritage, and oh yeah, Grandpa Greg, he became rich.
He became a businessman.
Yeah, and I thought, is that what I want the end of my life to be? Do I just want to have a lot of financial resources, even though I would have given them away? I thought, maybe God wants me to do something different. So I prayed. At that moment, with my son, he had cake all over his face, and I just prayed. I bowed my head and I said, God, I'm in my 20s, so I'm a young man. Mm-hmm. And I said, God, I don't want to miss what you want to happen in my life. I'm not going to run from you. I'm not going to be like a Jonah that runs away. No, I said, but God, I need to know what it is you want me to do. And God began to speak to me, not in my ears, not audibly, but as I began to read my Bible from that moment, God began to direct me to verses and passages where people were giving their lives to ministry. And so it became very clear that I was not to be in business, that I was to be in ministry. And so I went back to Bible college because I didn't complete it.
Yes.
So I had to go back and finish my degree. And then we became church planters here in Metro Manila. And I've enjoyed this life. I don't have any regrets there.
You mentioned earlier, sir, that you started at an early age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, you had a different dream before.
Uh-huh.
So in any industry, when you were starting, there will be struggles, difficulties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you were starting in the ministry, what were your challenges?
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges I had was casting vision and explaining what God had put in my heart. And so I began to tell what my vision was to people even that didn't even want to pay attention. Mm-hmm. And they would ignore me. There were people that laughed at my vision. And but I just continued to say that. So the struggle of casting the vision, I think, early on, when you had people who had maybe did not understand it, couldn't grasp it, or felt like what you were trying to do was very different than what they were doing, yeah. So they were opposed to it, then I felt like that this is a challenge. So that was the first thing. The second one is that to find the leaders to walk with you. Because any vision that God gives you should be large enough that you need a team.
Exactly.
And so where do you find a team? You have to win people to the Lord. You have to disciple them. You have to develop them as leaders. Leadership development is quite a challenge. And so finding other people who will buy into your vision and that who will even sacrifice themselves to be part of it was an initial challenge. So I remember casting vision to lots of people, being rejected, being laughed at, doing all that. And then I also remember leaders who would, they would appear, they were interested, wanting to be involved, but they didn't last. And so, but by God's grace, I was able to find some people that committed and that saw the vision and embraced it with me.
Because of the rejection, sir, of course, anyone who experienced rejection would actually think to give up.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time that you wanted to give up?
Well, I would say that there were times that the progress was slow. But, when you are sure of God's calling and the vision that you have is from God, you don't want to give up. There's just delays, maybe. What we would think would be delays, but in fact, it is still part of God's timing. Let me give you an example of this. So, early on, we were planting our church in the beginning years of Global Surge. We had a facility that we had rented and renovated, and actually I had raised funds. Our people had sacrificed to give to renovate this facility, and we felt like we could grow to a good size. And we had a lease contract on that. But because of a change of leadership in a local government, the lease was nullified. We were not allowed to stay. And we were given 30 days to move. Imagine you have a congregation, you have programs already in place. All of that is in place. And you're given 30 days. To make it even more difficult was the notice of the 30 days came while I was on an airplane going to the United States to speak. So I was not even present. It was received by our leadership, and my wife was aware of this. And so when I landed in Seattle, Washington, and got off the plane and turned on my phone, I noticed I had a bunch of messages. So I called my wife, Lyon, and I said, Lyon, what's going on? And she says, oh, we have been kicked out of the place that our church is renting, and I was supposed to be gone for 2.5 weeks on this speaking trip that I was on, and they were given 30 days to move, and I wasn't even there. I couldn't manage it. That was quite frustrating, I will have to say, but and I had a feeling of this is out of my control.
There's nothing that you can do.
No. And I'm just there. I'm like, wow. I felt compassion for my wife because she had to deal with the stress of this and all of that. But interesting enough, it was that very difficulty that moved our ministry to our present location.
The bigger location.
Yes, with a bigger footprint. And had not we been forced out of that location, we would not have experienced the exponential results of our ministry today. So, yes, there were times that you kind of feel that you're discouraged or things aren't going the way you want them to go. But God, if you follow God's plan, He's not abandoning you. He's not going to release you, and He will fulfill His vision. And today I can stand and give God the glory that it was His plan, not mine, that was successful.
And you were redirected by God. It was God's redirection.
Yeah.
Sir, can you give us a person or a specific event that had motivated you, or that reminded you that I should keep going, or I should pursue what I have envisioned in this ministry?
That's a very good question. So I've reflected on this for many years, and as I remember growing up in the home of a missionary, my father and mother, Boyd and Donna Lyons are their names. My mother's passed on, but my father is still serving the Lord. I remember as a child growing up that my parents really loved the ministry. I don't remember a time when we would sit around and my parents would, maybe at a meal or whatever, would complain. There was not a negative. They would, and it's not that they were never discouraged. Of course they went through difficult times, but they did not pass that on to me and my brother and that. So that's one thing that really affected the way I view ministry. The other thing is my mother was quite a visionary of herself. And she would tell me and my brother, you believe God for big things. You ask God for big things. And she would tell us stories from the Bible that the same God who parted the Red Sea is the same God you're talking to today. So why not ask him to do incredible things that nobody has ever seen before? So that really began to form the vision and the passion that I hold so dear to me as I pursue ministry. So as I look at our ministry, you know what? We can reach the world. We can do it. We can do it from Manila.
Be global.
Yes, and so it's no doubt that we will see an incredible impact. You know, I'll tell a quick story.
Sure.
When I was a child, about 8 or 9 years old, my mother had this heart to witness to the president of the Philippines. It was during the Marcos regime. It was late 60s. And there was a time that the president was taken ill, and I don't know what he was having, what the issue was. But I remember sitting at dinner, and my mother hearing the news that the president was sick and had been hospitalized for something, and she said to my father, she said, you know, somebody should go tell the president about Jesus and witness to the president. And my father said, yeah, somebody should. She said, well, he's in the hospital, so we know where he is. Let's go.
Wow.
And my dad says, you want to go to see the president in the hospital? My mom says, yeah. There's only a few hospitals that he could be at. So they did. And my mom actually made it through the PCG and sat with Imelda, the first lady, and shared the gospel and gave her a Bible. And two of her children were sitting there. And so that, when I realized that, my goodness, how many families where the mother says, yeah, I'm going to go witness to the president, and actually does it.
Your mom is very brave.
Oh my, it was an amazing experience. So I thought, as I grew older, you know, if my mother could do that, if God could open those doors for her, he can open those doors for me. And so I just believed that God could do that.
Yes, and as you believe, you were able to witness that with God, nothing is impossible.
Absolutely.
Right? 27 years ago, sir, you founded Global Search.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, for the past almost 3 decades, there were ups and downs in the ministry.
Yes.
How did you handle it, and what encouraged you to keep going?
To survive long-term in ministry, you have to be resolute in the vision that God has given you. You have to stay focused on the purpose that God has called you, what he wanted you to do. You cannot allow detractors, opposition, attacks, even failures that you would experience to distract you from God's purpose. I often say this, that I play to an audience of one, and that's God. So I am concerned what the reaction of others are, but I am primarily concerned with pleasing God. Mm-hmm. If people around me are not happy or do not agree with me, but I am confident that my decision and the direction that we're going is from God, that's all that I need to focus on. Ministry circumstances come and go. Ups and downs come and go. You cannot let your emotions dictate your movement in ministry. You must let your commitment to God define the direction that you go. I remember when we were planting our church, the first church, and we started very small. It was just my family, and we had reached a few people with the gospel, and it was difficult at times to get people to actually attend church, kind of like the pandemic, okay? And I remember one Sunday morning that I was at church early, and I prepared the place, and only had one team member with me at that time. And my family, my wife, of course, was there alongside me and my children. But on that Sunday, I remember it very distinctly that when it was time for the service, nobody was there.
Just you and your family.
Yes, and I called Luann. I said, "Is it Sunday? Maybe we're here on the wrong day because nobody is here." And now people eventually came. They came very late, okay, and I was so grateful that the people eventually showed up. But I remember that moment when I just wondered if anybody was gonna show up, and I thought, wow, what can we do? So I came to a decision that day. I decided to redouble my efforts. I decided to increase what I was doing, which was I wanted to make more contacts with more people. I wanted to talk to more people about the gospel. And so I began to use every opportunity I had. So I sacrificed my holidays, Christmas and New Year's Day. Of course, I spent time with Noche Buena, with my family and all of that. But on Christmas Day, when everybody else was resting and relaxing, I decided to go out and meet people. And I gathered 10 baskets of fruit that we had. And I went out just nearby to the neighborhoods. And when I would drive down these streets, and I would ask God, guide me to a family that could benefit from this, that needs an encouragement on this Christmas day. Because the assumption is that because it's Christmas, everybody is having a good time.
Resting.
But in reality, there are many families that Christmas is not a happy time.
That's true.
If they had just lost a loved one, the Christmas time is not a happy time. They remember the loss of their loved one. If they're experiencing financial difficulty, maybe their Christmas really is very simple. And so God led me to 10 families on that Christmas day that I get, and they were shocked. Who is this American guy that speaks Tagalog and bringing a gift we don't even know who he was? And God enabled me to reach people on Christmas Day. And I did the same thing on New Year's Day. And so that began to draw even more people into our community, our small groups, and we started discipling the people that I had won. And so it was the difficulty that propelled me to do more. Instead of letting difficulty and ups and downs, the circumstances that are clearly temporary, to shut you down, let those circumstances push you forward.
That's true.
And that's how I believe that God has led me through this ministry.
So instead of sulking and then thinking, I feel I might be a failure or anything, you reached out to other people to actually find a way to know other people, to be in service of them.
Yes.
One of the principles that you have imparted with us, or that you have imparted in Global Surge, is to be a servant leader.
Yes, yes.
For you, sir, what is a servant leader?
A servant leader is someone who puts others' needs ahead of his own. A servant leader is someone who is not, no matter what position they have in ministry, is not above doing what people would consider the lowest job. If people hang around me during ministry, they might notice that often I walk around and I pick up garbage and trash.
Fix chairs.
Yes, pinupulot ko yung mga basura. I just get that because I realize that if I see a need or something that is there, why not do it myself? So I am not above cleaning the CR. I'm not above sweeping. In fact, I've kind of surprise the janitorial staff sometimes because they find me cleaning things and they're like, well, Pastor, you should not do that. But in reality, it needs to be clean. So I'm not offended that somebody didn't do that. I just want to help. So that, I believe that helps me keep my focus on being a servant leader. You have to really set your own goals aside, personal goals aside, in favor of other people's goals. Some people are not aware of the full story of the McDonald's Corporation. Everybody knows about McDonald's, And Ray Kroc was the one who scaled McDonald's. And of course, he's a very wealthy man. But what people don't realize that Ray Kroc not only became very wealthy, but Ray Kroc made so many suppliers wealthy as well. He put the suppliers' needs often in front of his own needs, knowing that if he helped them succeed, it would in turn bless him. And so it's not about my success. It's about making you successful. It's about making every ministry leader successful. Even every member who is trying to witness, how can I help them be successful, be effective, do the best they can do? And it really doesn't matter who gets the credit. If a leader is looking for credit or his own personal honor, that's not a servant leader. I would rather not have my name anywhere and have God's name everywhere. That is the epitome of a servant leader.
It's like, I am not someone to be grateful. I mean, you should not thank me. I just did this to glorify the Lord.
Yes, yes.
One of the effective ways, since you mentioned earlier that you reached out other people when they were not going into the church. Mm-hmm. One of the effective strategies of Global Surge is the NFD churches, or the non-facility dependent churches.
Right.
How did you come up with such strategy?
Well, the non-facility dependent church came about from me assessing and studying the church planting models that were present in an urban center. And I began to realize that the cost of facilities were very high. And in fact, a large percentage of the resources of a church plant goes into the facility. You have a facility, you have to guard the facility, you have to clean the facility, you have to pay utilities for the facility. And so I thought, what models do we have in the United States of church planting? One is in the book of Acts. The book of Acts, churches did not have buildings. They did not have facilities. They met in the homes of people. They gathered in the temple courts, in the public areas. And so I thought, maybe we can plant churches with just per-use facilities, rather than having to spend so much of our resources on what I would call brick and mortar. And I would rather spend the funds and the resources on people and serving the community. And so that birthed the non-facility dependent urban church planting model. And it has helped us scale the number of churches and the people that have been reached with the Word of God. So we have churches that meet under bridges, in basketball courts, in restaurants, under tolda tents, and all of that. But they are growing, they are reaching people, they are impacting the community, even without the facility.
It's like telling the pastors or the church leaders that the place or the equipments or the instruments are not important. What's important is how you reach other people.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Earlier, sir, you mentioned that you started in the ministry in a quite early age.
Yes.
You were starting a family and you wanted to be a businessman, but you you follow the path of your God-given purpose.
Yes.
Now, what can you say to the younger generation who wanted to do what you do, or who aspires to be in the ministry but are hesitant or holding back because of the things that they want to let go?
When you're in your 20s, you think you have a lot of time. You live your life as if, I'm going to live forever. And then very soon you wake up and you realize you're 30. And then you think, wow, okay, I have to now take care of my family. I sometimes have to take care of my parents. I have a career. I feel locked in. I have bills to pay. And all of those things come into your life, and you begin to make excuses of why you can't serve God. Well, I can't do that now. And I think so many people fail to realize or even remember what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 12:1. Now, Solomon was the wisest man, and he wrote a lot of the Bible. He wrote Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. Proverbs is an incredible book, and Ecclesiastes is a more personal book about what Solomon thought about his life. And at the end of his book, in chapter 12, he says, remember your Creator. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come. And so that is great advice for people who are in their 20s and even early 30s, that this is a great time in your life to give to God, to spend your time for God, and to get your life on a path that God is controlling, not the circumstances of life are controlling. I am so glad that when I was very young, I made the decision to go back to Bible college and prepare for ministry when I was 23 years old. And so I realized, only God was the one who dealt with me about that. I've read the Bible and listening to preachers and messages and devotions, and that's what drove me to this decision. I remember an experience I had a few years back. I was speaking in a church in the United States. It was a Wednesday night. The crowd was very small. It was kind of an intimate type setting, a few people. I brought a message, and actually I was not scheduled to be at this location. It was because I missed a flight, and I had an extra day before my next flight, and so I went and I spoke at this church. And at the end of this church, a lady came up to me, and she said this to me. She said, when I was 12 years old, God spoke to my heart to serve Him. But then life happened. And 50 years passed. She says, I am now 62, and I've not followed God in the ministry all these years. Can God still use me? Now, I told her, of course God can still use you. But I also thought, wow, sayang. 50 years passed.
Sayang naman.
And I think sometimes, young people in their 20s and early 30s don't realize how impactful their life could be if they give it fully to God. Most people don't realize that the disciples that Jesus called were His peers, and He began His ministry at age 30. So the disciples, the majority of them, were in their 20s. Imagine the disciples that are going to carry the Christian movement for centuries were called in their 20s. So anybody who's who's listening, 20 years old, early 30s, jump in. You will never forget it. You will never regret it.
That's true. It's like, stop blaming the life
Yes.
you have right now.
Exactly.
And you just gotta surrender.
Yes. And God will unfold things in your life that will amaze you. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
You also mentioned earlier the challenges, the ups and downs of the ministries, and also Global Surge is now at its 27th year. Did you ever imagine that you'll be in this situation, or you'll be where you are now?
That's a good question. I guess the answer would be yes and no. I am amazed at all that God has done in the ministry of Global Surge, and it's a result of God's moving in this, and then second, great people that serve in the ministry, but yet on the other side of the coin, this is what we prayed for. And I think sometimes, we pray and we ask God, if we really believe that God can answer prayers, why are we amazed when He does answer the prayers? So, yeah, I am amazed, but I knew God could do it.
And sir, with everything that you've achieved, with all the grace of God has given into your life, the blessings, is there anything else you want to achieve?
Yes, I do have some goals still. I still have a vision to plant thousands more churches in urban centers, not only in Asia now, but around the world. I have a specific number of pastors, missionaries, and church leaders to train, and I've set a goal to lead in training 100,000 new pastors, missionaries, and ministry leaders. And then the center, the epicenter of the gospel is moving to Asia. So it's time for Asia to step up and be a major sending continent. Korea is already sending missionaries. The Philippines is sending missionaries, but we need to do more. So my prayer, my third goal is to send thousands of Asian cross-cultural missionaries throughout the world.
Right now, all of our leaders, or most of the leaders I know in church or in Global Search, look up to you. We all look up to you. And we see you as our mentor, our coach. You've been coaching missionaries, church leaders, ministry leads, pastors, and professionals. If there's one thing that you constantly remind them of, what would that be?
Well, actually, I don't know if there would be one. I would give you three things. One, I would say that believe God for great things. And stay focused on the vision that God calls you to. And then this one is very important. Don't quit. Just don't quit. There's too many people who say, I used to be in ministry.
That's right.
I hope people say, I love being in ministry because I haven't quit.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
And sir, is it a conscious effort that you still meet these pastors or these leaders, though some of them are already established or are already doing great in the ministry that they're in?
Yes, it is. It is a continuing effort. God created us to be in relationships, and relationships can be challenging. I know you're married, and I'm married.
Yes.
Even when you have a spouse, just having that relationship as a spouse does not mean that relationship is going to be good. You have to work on that. You have to develop that, and that evolves in as life moves forward. And the same thing in the relationship with ministry friends and partners. It is important to go out of your way, and you have to sacrifice time. You may have to sacrifice money. You may have to sacrifice even, your energy so that you can spend time with them. But I will say that, yes, it is so important to continue that relationship and maintain it as best you can, moving all throughout your ministry.
Right now, sir, can you say that those efforts are worth it?
Oh, absolutely. When I spend time with ministry leaders, I get supercharged. I grow in my vision. I hear their vision. I want to motivate them and help them to do more, help them to see paths of how God can bless them. So, yeah, I love it. I'm somewhat addicted to it, I would say. Okay.
Well, sir, since you're coaching and you're mentoring, you were once a mentee or someone
Yes.
was your mentor.
Yes.
Who was your mentor, sir? And what was the most important lesson or guidance that mentor has shared with you?
Throughout my life and ministry, I have had many mentors. Proverbs 11 admonishes us to have many counselors. And so I have had in my life, I've been blessed to have mentors in different areas of life. So I keep mentors that I meet with in the area of my spiritual life, in the area of my moral life to keep me accountable, and then in areas of leadership. And so I really can't point to one name or one person, and they have changed through the years. I try to find men who are older than me, but later I have decided that I need mentors even that are younger than me. Now that seems somewhat countercultural because, or counterintuitive, because most people think of a mentor as somebody older. But in this changing world, we need mentors from multiple age groups, because if what we're learning from somebody who is older, it might be principles that apply across the board, but to stay in touch with the changing culture, which is so rapidly changing and moving away from God, I need to be in touch with even younger people than me and listen, truly listen to their advice and gain from their influence.
So it's like you stand for not because someone is older than me doesn't mean he's wiser than me as well, and not because someone is younger than me I am wiser than that person. You can also learn something from younger people.
I do. I learn things from my grandchildren, and which surprises me, you know. So yes.
And it makes us more diverse.
Yes.
Should I say? Because
yes.
there are also some instances that, oh, I don't know that.
Yeah.
You have that eureka moment.
Yes,
right?
That's right. Very good, yeah.
Well, sir, right now, 20 years from now, 20 years from now, Dr. Greg, what is your vision?
Well, our world is changing, as I mentioned, so rapidly. The movement of knowledge is changing at very, very quick pace. And so we have to stay engaged with how we can communicate the gospel well to people. The next 10 to 20 years, it's going to get us closer if the Lord tarries, it waits to come back. It'll get closer to his return. We have in the Bible prophecy that tells us that the world will become more connected. There will eventually be a one world government. There will eventually be all of these things that are prophesied in the Bible. So we should not be surprised that our world is moving away from God, more secular, more humanistic, people wanting their own desires. And so in the next 10 to 20 years, the church must really work hard at staying connected with the communities and with people so they can effectively communicate the gospel. Sometimes as church leaders and as Christians in general, we develop our own bubble of communication or our own bubble of life, and that insulates us from the lost world around us. I want to stay connected to the lost world. So I always have unbelieving friends around me. And my goal is to bring the light to them, to help them understand when they hit a crisis that there's an answer in Jesus Christ. The next 10 to 20 years, we are going to move around the world faster. We're going to communicate more easily. In fact, recently I did a study that we will reach 8 billion people in 2022 in our world. 1 billion people will have been added to our population as a world, as a globe, since 2011. So in 11 years, 1 billion people have been added. That means that there is 1 billion people under the age of 11 that are children. The next 10 to 20 years will be driven by the thoughts, the visions, and what this 1 billion people are doing. And we have to be fully engaged in reaching them. So I am motivated to create new paradigms of ministry, new ways to reach our world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if I were to select one thing that would be that I would change, it would be very difficult because we do not know the future. Only God knows that. So I have to learn to live by the principles that God has given me and apply the methods of ministry to the changing times so that I can always bring the world that I live in connection with the truth of God's word.
That's true. Like, we can't control what will happen in the future.
Right.
We don't know it yet.
That's correct. Yes.
So we just have to let God control what will happen and what is happening right now.
Yes.
Sir, metaphorically, you meet your 15-year-old self, the 15 young Greg.
Okay.
What would you tell him?
I would encourage him, of course, the basics of Christian life. Read your Bible more, pray more, stay attuned to God. I would also tell a 15-year-old version of myself to start earlier in serving the Lord. And even though I began in my 20s, there were some years that I could have done more. And so I would encourage him to start earlier and to fully commit and prepare himself to serve God.
Because most of the ministers that we have right now are younger.
True in Global Search, and that is because we have intentionally pursued the young Asian urban resident. So our vision has been to reach the young people, knowing that that they will eventually grow to be adults. In fact, I say this to people. I said, there's only one source for where you can find a man, and that's in a boy.
That's true.
The only place a man comes from is a boy. So if you want a good man who is faithfully serving God, you better start when they're a boy and teach them the principles, or a young girl to teach her the principles of what they should follow as they move forward.
Start them when they were still young.
Yes.
Listening or witnessing how you work, we can see how dedicated and passionate you are. If there's a Bible verse, or what is a Bible verse that have fueled that passion, and how did it speak to you?
You know, a verse that I have held on to for decades has been Psalm 84:11. The Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord gives grace and glory, and no good thing will he withhold from those that walk uprightly. In that verse, embodied in that verse, is God's protection and guidance. He is a sun and a shield. There are many Hebrew words, or several Hebrew words, that define the word shield. It's translated in English as a shield. But in the Hebrew, they have large shields and small shields. The kind of shield that Psalms is talking about is a protective shield that protects somebody. And the sun is obvious that it's giving light and guidance and helping you walk your way. The Lord gives grace and glory, so there are times that you're going to make mistakes, that God will be gracious to you. And the last part of the verse that really has impacted me, and I've reflected on this throughout my life, is that as long as I focus on walking uprightly with God, no good thing will be withheld from me. So God has blessed me. He's blessed me first with a good wife. He's blessed me with good children. He's blessed me with a ministry that has unfolded. Even though it was not my vision to have something big, it was my vision just to have something effective, something that was impacting people's lives. But God saw fit to bless it even more as I continued to walk with Him.
Thank you so much, Dr. Greg. Thank you so much for gracing us your time. And
it's been my pleasure. Yes.
We in Global Search are immensely grateful to have a visionary leader like you.
Oh, God bless you.
Thank you so much again.
There were times that the progress was slow. But when you are sure of God's calling and the vision that you have is from God, you don't want to give up. There's just delays maybe. But in fact, it is still part of God's timing.